Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Emor, Tavshin Pei Beis. We're going to begin Perek Chav Gimel, chapter 23, Pasuk Beis and Gimel, verses 2 and 3. We are going to be discussing the part, we're going to have two items tonight. The first item is about Shabbos. And this week's Parsha has a whole section on what we call the Moadim. Moadim is what we call, is the word that's used for the Yom Tovim, for the holidays. A Moed means a set time. Daber el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, v'amar aleim, and say to them, Moyadei Hashem, the set times of God, or the festivals of God, asher tikru oisam mikrei kodesh, that you shall proclaim them as sacred occasions. Eilehem moyadei, these are my festivals. So I'm going to share with you the commentary of the Sefornu. What Sefornu says on the first half of this pasuk, where it says, Moyadei Hashem, the set times of God, the festivals of God, that you shall call them Mikrei Kodesh, which we translated as a sacred occasion. If you look at the words literally, Mikrei comes from the word kara, call, callings of holiness. Mikrei Kodesh, callings of holiness. What does that mean? So the Sefornu says, and the Sefornu actually is starting off with explaining, where does this discussion of the holidays come into the book of Vayikra? After speaking about the sacrifices and those who offer them, big part of Vayikra, of Leviticus, is about the sacrifices, and the beginning of the Parsha of Emor talks about the Kohanim. So after speaking about the sacrifices and those who offer the sacrifices, the Kohanim, shakavana behem, that the purpose, the intent with them, what is the purpose of the karbonis? What is the goal of bringing the sacrifices? Hashares hashchina b'Yisrael, that the Shechina, divine presence of God, should rest amongst the Jewish people. Shechina is a word, is a term, the word that's used to describe a close experience with God. Shechina, divine presence. It's an experience with God. And the purpose of the sacrifices is that the Shechina, that the divine presence of God, should rest amongst the Jewish people. How do we know this? Ka'amra, as the Torah states, regarding the daily sacrifice, it's called the Olas Tamid, the continuous sacrifice. The Ola offering, it's a communal offering for the whole Jewish people that's done twice a day, every day of the year. A consistent, a continuous burnt offering for your generations. Pesach al Moed, at the opening of the tent of meeting, which is the term used for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. Lifnei Hashem, before God. Asher ivo'ei lochem shama, that I will aid, I will set up a time, I will meet with you there. So it's very clear that what is happening when we bring the sacrifices is that when we bring the sacrifices at the tabernacle, that is where God meets with us. So after discussing the sacrifices and those who offer it, with the purpose of the sacrifices being to bring the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, amongst the Jewish people, Diber b'moadim, the Torah then spoke about the holidays. Asher b'shvisasam, that when it comes to resting on them, resting meaning refraining from doing our regular activity, yechaven lishbais v'masei hedyoit b'ktsasam legamri, the Torah tells us to rest, to refrain from our regular activities when it comes to some of the moadim, when it comes to some of the festivals, K'inyan b'Shabbos v'Yom Kippurim. I'm sorry, b'Ktsasam legamri. By some of them, we completely suspend all activities, all of our regular activities. K'inyan b'Shabbos v'Yom Kippurim, like on Shabbos and Yom Kippur. Actually, I should have read Pasuk Gimel, the verse 3, that after the Torah says these are the Moadim, the festivals, the first thing mentioned is Shabbos. 6 days work will be done, and work has a specific meaning when it comes to Shabbos. Ubayom Hashvi, and on the seventh day, Shabbat Shabbosain, a Sabbath of complete rest. Mikra Kodesh, a sacred occasion. Kamalacha Loisasu, or work, meaning all that falls under the activity that would be called Melacha, which we literally translate as work, but it has a specific meaning. I'm not going to go into that right now. Loisasu, you shall not do it. Shabbos hi Hashem, it is Shabbos to God, wherever you dwell. So the first of the Moedim, the first of the holidays mentioned is Shabbos. And Shabbos and Yom Kippur are the holidays where all Melacha, all work is suspended. And so therefore, as he says, the Torah now speaks about the holidays, that when we are told to suspend our regular activities, and Shabbos and Kippur, when we completely are to do that, we are told to completely suspend Melacha on Shabbos and Yom Kippur, and to be involved by them, the Torah Vizkei Kodesh, in the study of Torah and holy endeavors. The Torah tells us, what does the Torah want from us on Shabbos and on Yom Kippur, where we're suspending all activities? The answer is, that's the time now that you can study Torah and be involved in holy endeavors. Ka'amrei, as the Torah states, when in the Ten Commandments, when Shabbos is mentioned, Sheish yamim tavod, you shall work for 6 days. V'yom hashvi Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha, and the seventh day is a Shabbos, a Sabbath, a rest day for Hashem your God. Shetish, meaning shetish b'is b'malachtecha, you shall rest, suspend your activities. V'ye'izkecha kulei l'Hashem Elokecha, and your entire involvement should be for God. So Shabbos and Yom Kippur, where the Sephorah says all activities are suspended, what are you supposed to be doing then? Studying Torah, being involved in holy activities. And when it comes to some of the holidays, the suspension of activity is what he calls melechas avoda, work of labor. And I'll explain what that means soon. Which really means that when it comes to other holidays other than Shabbos and Yom Tov, we are allowed to cook. That's called ochel nefesh. The Torah tells us that what we need for food preparation and things that are corollaries of that, we can perform that. You can't do it on Shabbos, we can do it on Yom Tov. Okay. As we find by the other holidays that there's certain activities that are suspended, but not all like on Shabbos. So there too, the intention there is that together with the joy, with the rejoicing that we do with our Creator on the holiday, the joy here refers to the fact that we cook in order to perform the mitzvah of simcha, rejoicing on Yom Tov, which is to eat, to have festive meals. Part of the time, you will also be involved in holy endeavors. As our sages say, Yom Tov, when it comes to a Yom Tov, meaning not Shabbos or Yom Kippur, Chetzei LaHashem and Chetzei Lachem, half for you, half for Hashem. Meaning, we know that on Yom Tov, to say it simply, there is a bigger mitzvah to eat on Yom Tov than on Shabbos. Yes, we have a mitzvah called Oneg Shabbos, which is actually not a Torah obligation, and we have special Shabbos foods in honor of Shabbos, but the involvement in festive eating on Yom Tov is a bigger mitzvah, and actually in practice was done on a greater level than on Shabbos, to the point that it's described as half the time for yourselves, half the time for a festive meal, and half the time to God for prayer and for learning Torah. As a matter of fact, it's brought down that the practice used to be on a Yom Tov, and I believe it's the way it went. It says they would get up early, daven, learn, then have a lengthy festive meal, and then go back to learn. And that's the mitzvah of simcha. And Yontif, the mitzvah of simcha, rejoicing. You don't have that same mitzvah on Shabbos. That translates into the fact that we are more involved in a holiday meal on Yontif than we are on Shabbos. That's the way it's supposed to be. The point being, but therefore, on Shabbos, he really calls it's completely to Hashem. Which at least from a Torah point, that's what it would be. And it would mean that there is meant to be more involvement in Torah study and other holy endeavors on Shabbos than on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov, you're supposed to be rejoicing more. But after that, it's back to Hashem. After that, it's back to Torah study. So the goal of Shabbos, so what we're supposed to be doing, the point of suspending whatever level of activities we suspend, whether it be on Shabbos, Yom Kippur, or Yom Tov on the holidays, the point of that suspension is to be able to have the time and focus on Torah study and other holy endeavors. Even on Shabbos on Yom Tov, when we talk about what we eat, we sing Zemiris, we sing songs. It's meant to be a holy endeavor. It's supposed to be an inspirational meal. So there too, although we are indulging, so to speak, we are indulging in ourselves, but even that is meant to be sanctified and to elevate our Shabbos or our holiday. And then the rest of the time is meant to be for holy endeavors, for Torah study. Yes, you take a rest on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. That's also important. But the point being that Shabbos and Yom Tov is not just a day off for leisure. The point is, it is meant to be, the suspension of work is really give us a chance to be focused on spirituality and holy endeavors. Ubazeh tishra shechina al Yisrael b'li safek. And when this is done properly, there is no question the divine presence of Hashem rests within us. That's the connection here. The connection is the sacrifices are to bring the Shekhinah in our midst, and the holidays, Shabbos and the holidays, where our regular activities are suspended, there too, the point is that we do the kinds of things that will bring the divine presence in our midst, and that is when we suspend our regular activities and our focus is on holy endeavors, Torah study, prayer, and other holy endeavors, then we will have the Shekhinah rest amongst us too. And it's interesting that when he talks about the Yom Tovim, the wording of the Sefornu is that with the joy that the Jewish people rejoice with their Creator, it's not just a party. Yom Tov is taking the theme of the day. You take the theme of Pesach and the theme of Sukkot and the theme of Shavuos, and you rejoice with your Creator. That's the joy. Rejoice with our Creator for what He's done for us. With that, there is also the Chetzil Hashem, half the time that has to be devoted to spiritual endeavors, to Torah study, to prayer, and to other holy endeavors. Now, and he says, Omar oise moyadim. So now the pasuk, going back to the pasuk that says, Hashem says, the Moadei Hashem, the festivals of God, that you shall call them Mikroi Kodesh. Now he explains what do those words mean. Oise moyadim, those set times, those holidays, shetikru oise Mikroi Kodesh, that you are to call them callings of holiness. Pirish meaning Asifas am leiske kodesh, the gathering of the people for holy endeavors. Ki asifas ha'am tikra mikra. When you talk about gathering the people together, that's the word mikra, calling. Or very often you'll see a English translation, mikra kodesh, a convocation of holiness. That means a gathering of holiness, bringing people together for holiness. The Moadei Hashem, the festivals of Hashem, which, as listed afterwards, are Shabbos, Yom Kippur, and all the other holidays, they are to be Mikroi Kodesh, gatherings for sanctity, for holiness. That's what it means. That's Mikroi Kodesh. That's what it means. These festivals of God that you, Asher Tikra Yisrael Kodesh, that you call them gatherings, convocations of holiness. Elei Mayadai, these are my festivals. Which the Sefornu says means, if you call them Mikrei Kodesh, if these festivals of God, if you call them if you proclaim them as convocations of holiness, as gatherings of holiness, these are my festivals. He writes the Sefornu that God is saying, these are the festivals that I desire, that I want, that I'm pleased with. They're called my festivals. I like them. These are the festivals that I want. However, but let's say you don't call them gatherings for holiness. And they'll just be about basically mundane endeavors, just dealing with the temporary life's pleasures. If that's what it's all about, these are not my festivals. But rather they will fall into what the prophet said to the Jewish people before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, your festivals I despise. If you don't turn your Yom Tov for Shabbos into a gathering for holiness, Hashem said, it's not mine. I don't consider that my Shabbos. I don't consider that the Shabbos that I want, that I'm talking to you about. Then it's yours. It's your festival. It's your day off. And that's not what I'm looking for in Shabbos and Yom Tov. People say, what's Shabbos about? Oh, it's about gathering together with friends and family and resting. That's all true. There's truth to that. But if that's all there is to it, then that's a big mistake. Because there is a place for family time. Family time, take kids to the park, very important. No question about it. But family time at the Shabbos table, it can be a Mikra Kodesh. It's an occasion for holiness. Singing Zmiris, words of Torah, talk about the Parsha. It's a chance it's not just the meal. It's not just a get together. It's a get together for holiness. And the same thing on Yom Tov. If all we look at Shabbos and Yom Tov as a day off for leisure, then we've missed the boat. We've missed the goal of Shabbos. And even that physical rest that we get on Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's also all part of refreshing ourselves, strengthening ourselves to be able to take out of Shabbat, first of all, to get that, to refresh ourselves. We need that. We need a certain rest. Our sages say, Shina b'Shabbos Tanug. Sleeping on Shabbos is considered a pleasurable thing. It's something that we do need to kind of refresh ourselves with. But we're not refreshing ourselves just for the sake of refreshing ourselves. Refreshing ourselves to be able to strengthen ourselves for the coming week, and to refresh ourselves so that we can utilize Shabbos as a Mikra Kodesh, as a convocation, as a gathering of holiness. It all works together. It's all meant to work together. Even those material endeavors of Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's all part of the same idea. It's all part of the same goal. The goal is that these days should be Mikra Kodesh, occasions, gatherings of holiness. And that's what Shabbos Yom Tov are about. And that's what lies in the words that we see these words, and we say these words very often. We say Mikra Kodesh, which we sometimes automatically think a calling of holiness. It is a calling of holiness. The foreigner says Mikra means, a calling means a gathering of holiness. And whenever we say that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's meant to tell us the goal of Shabbos and Yom Tov is a gathering for holiness. We're suspending regular activities so we can be focused and have the time and the focus to be involved in spiritual endeavors, in Torah study, in prayer, and in Zmiris, and whatever spiritual elevating experiences that we can have. Okay, the next slide I want to share with you, something towards the end of the Parsha, where the Torah says the following. Talks about damages, talks about a person damaging another person. This is Parak Chaf Dalet, chapter 24, Pasuk Chaf through Chaf Aleph, verses 22 through 21. V'ish kitem mun ba'amisai. If a person shall maim his friend, kasher asa, as he has done, kein ya'asa lo, so shall be done to him. Shever tachas shever, a fracture for a fracture. Ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Shein tachas shein, a tooth for a tooth. Kasher yitem mun ba'adam, as one has afflicted his friend, ken yinasin bo, so shall he be afflicted. Sounds like, tit for tat. You break someone's arm, we break your arm. Knock at somebody's tooth, knock at your tooth. That's not what it means. That's not the law. The Talmud goes through lengths to explain that this means a tooth for a tooth means you have to pay him for his tooth. There's a way to evaluate a person, that how much does a person lose their value? Well, let's say you blind a person, chas v'shalom. There's a certain monetary value that we can assign, certain monetary loss we can assign to that. And we evaluate it by the person who was damaged. And it doesn't mean that we're going to do exactly what we did to that person, but it means that you have to compensate him for that. You have to compensate him for the eye. Okay. The obvious question is, if the Torah means compensation, it doesn't mean literally to do it. Why did the Torah use those words? Why did the Torah use words that are clearly saying it's literal, that exactly what you did to that person is done to you, but oral law, the Torah Shabbat, the oral law tells us it's not what it means. So why did it say it that way? So another question that we should ask is the following. I explained to you that the compensation works by the injured person. According to what his injury is, that injury devaluates him, and that devaluation, whichever way it's measured, whichever way it's calculated, is now paid for. There's a way of calculating a value, a monetary value to a person with an eye or without an eye. According to one opinion in the Talmud, the eye that we're talking about that you're paying for is not the value of the victim's eye, but it's the value of the perpetrator's eye. The person who has to pay for maiming his friend, we actually evaluate as if he was the one who was maimed, and that's what he pays to his friend. Why do we do that way? It makes more sense, seemingly, to do it by the person that was damaged, according to the person who was damaged. So I saw a very interesting explanation given by Rabbi Soloveitchik, that's all. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said like this: were the Torah to have just said pay, then a person could come to think that, damaging a person, all it is just, taking away some of his value. If I break his window, I pay for his window. If I knock at his eye, I pay for his eye. We can start looking at what we've done as merely a monetary loss. That's what we might think, which means we'll diminish the severity of what we've done. Therefore, the Torah says, really? You know what should be happening to you for what you've done to this person? The same thing that you did to him should be happening to you. That's what should be happening. The severity of what you've done deserves that you should have to suffer the same way. But God decreed it's not that way. God decreed, instead of that, you're going to pay. Why? I don't know. But that's the point. The point is that the Torah is expressing the payment in the form of what should be happening to you, so that you understand fully the severity of what you've done, and God has had mercy on you and said, you'll pay instead. You'll also ask for forgiveness. That's a given. So therefore, the Torah said it in this form, because trying to say, this is what you really deserve. And now we can understand why there's the opinion that says, not measuring it by the victim's eye, but by the perpetrator's eye. Because the perpetrator should have lost his eye. He should have lost his eye. And therefore, the money that's replacing that goes according to his eye, because that's what should have been lost. But the point of it all is for the person to realize, to make sure the person doesn't think that by paying, all I did was monetarily hurt him. All I did was devalue him. No, you've done a lot worse than that. You have maimed the person. That's a lot more than just damaging him. And your payment is not because that's all it is. The payment is in place of the fact that what you did to him should have happened to you. That's the severity of what you've done. Realize that. Don't forget that when you're paying. Realize the severity of what you've done, and that paying is God's kindness to let you off the hook. Have a wonderful evening.